So we've done the Irish, we've done the Scotch. There is a Welsh whisky as well called Penderyn, and there may be a couple of others that are opening soon, but I haven't managed to get hold of a Penderyn yet, so that's one's going to have to wait. But there is a English whisky as well. Now, there has been English whisky before. Whisky isn't exclusive to Scotch and the Irish. When Scotch was big in the sort of 1700s, there were English distilleries as well, but they've all died away, and Scotland in particular sort of dominated the market. Irish whiskies kind of came on board, got better recognition, but then kind of died away, and Scotch has just kept on trucking. So for donkey's years there hasn't been sort of an English whisky as such, because it was really hard to break into the market. However, recently there are a couple of other distilleries that are kind of following the lead of what is called the English Whisky Company. Now, essentially this was a farmer that was retiring, wanted something to do, a guy called James Nelstrop, who wanted a project. It was kind of like, I'm retiring, I'm not going to work anymore, I fancy doing something. So he decided with his son Andrew to open a distillery in Norfolk. Now, if you're watching from outside the UK, or like me, your geography of the UK is absolutely rubbish, I'm going to put up a map for you now to show where Norfolk is. It's basically the bum of England. And that's probably says something for the people that live there as well. But yeah, so these guys decided to open a distillery and kind of see if they could make a good fist of it. Now, they managed to collar a guy called Ian Henderson, who was a distillery manager at Lefroy on Islay. So they managed to get somebody, tons of experience, knew exactly what they were doing. And basically, with the English Whisky Company, the releases that they bring out, they release them in chapters. Basically showing a progression and evolution of the whisky as they make different styles and varieties and experiment and all sorts of things like that. Now, this particular one, which is chapter 11, this was another one that was donated by Chris and Lindsay Cook. I'm going to put that picture of Chris up again, just to embarrass him more than anything else. This was part of their collection, which was really kindly donated. And I've never had the English Whisky Company, any of their releases at all. Essentially, once they started in December 2006. And by the time they had releases coming out, I'd left the whisky shop, I'd left Diageo, and I'd been out of the drinks game I'd gone out of the drinks industry by the time that these were coming out. So I've never encountered any of these. It should be quite interesting. Now, this particular one, chapter 11, is quite highly regarded because they decided to do a really heavily peated version. So they're basically buying in malt from various sources. That's already been kind of prepared, ready for distilling. So they're distilling it in Norfolk, but then buying malt from potentially Scotland or elsewhere. And there's a very good chance, although I've not been able to get any confirmation, but there's a very good chance that they bought this probably from Lefroy because they've got the links to them. Ian Henderson's now retired fully. They've got a guy called, David Fitt, who's a brewer from Green King that Ian basically trained up. But with the links that they've got to Lefroy, I'm very much willing to bet that they managed to source heavily peated malt from Lefroy or wherever they get theirs from to make a heavily peated whisky at their distillery. So it's released at 46% as well. So it's a slightly higher alcohol percentage. They do have a cask strength version, but this particular one is they've released as one that pour and drink type thing, rather than having to add any water. And I'm not going to a 46%. If it's over 50, then I'll add water once I've tasted it, which is in the rules. But anything under 50%, I'm not going to, because if they've released it at 46% and the alcohol burns too high, they shouldn't have done it. They should have maybe knocked it back a little bit more. So here we go, because I am very intrigued to know what this is like. Now, like I say, there are some other distilleries that have recently opened, but they don't have anything released just yet. Now, whisky has to be, to release a single malt whisky, it has to be aged in casks for a minimum of 3 years. So if you open a distillery today, you can't actually launch a new whisky from your distillery for 3 years. You can distill it, You can get the still off, you can put it into cask, but you can't do anything with that whiskey and market it as a whiskey, or a single malt whiskey in particular, until it's 3 years old. Bourbon, on the other hand, unless you want to call it straight bourbon, you can leave it in the cask for a month and then wang it in a bottle and stick it on the shelves. So it's quite a high cost to start with, because you've got to build the distillery, you've got to get the stills, you've got to get all the production going, and then sit there for 3 years and go, well, I hope it's good. And even then, at 3 years, it's not going to be undrinkable, but it's going to be very, very young and very, very tight, because all your maturation, all your aging is in the cask. And the longer it sits in the cask, the more it's picking up the flavours from the wood, the more it's picking up the influences from the air that's coming into the cask and the evaporation out. Now, you can leave it for too long and it can age too much and actually lose a lot of the characters that are in it, or it can just dissipate into nothingness. But at 3 years, it's still going to be really, really young, and that's why most whiskies tend to be at least 10 years before they get launched. So even if you hit 3 years, you're still launching a whiskey and getting it bottled and out into the shelves. That isn't really going to be comparable to a 10 or a 12 or anything like that. So it's still a big risk. And that's why these guys are kind of doing these chapters and saying, look, this is what we've got, this is what we've got now, this is what we're going to have next year, and keep releasing them. And hopefully the people that are buying them aren't necessarily drinking them, but are just going to keep them, and then in 10 years' time go, right, we've got the whole range, let's go try them one after the other and see the progression. And you've got their money, they've bought 10 bottles off you, and they've just sat there, and then you could probably get away with it being absolutely shit because they're opening them all going, oh, it's not very nice, I don't like it, but I've opened it now. Very cynical me. That's the English whiskey company aren't deliberately making, it's not a scam, they're not deliberately making shit whiskey to fool people into buying bottles, not open it, and then wait for 10 years' time and just take all the money and fuck off. It's not going to happen. Anyway, so this is heavily peated. Ooh, and it is heavily peated. Now, a couple of reviews I've read of this have talked about the fact that it's not classically either. It's picking up the characters, but it's not necessarily as maybe peppery as some. Another one said it wasn't as iodine-y. Now, I'm getting that medicinal on there. I'm getting that kind of euthymal toothpaste, doctors, dentists sort of feel, and less kind of bonfire smoke, and the kind of fiery smokiness or the pepperiness that you can get from some of the other islands as well. Now, this is 3 years old, apparently. It doesn't say on the label, they wouldn't really want to advertise it as that anyway, but from some of the reviews I've read, this particular one is a 3-year-old, so it's still really young. But considering it's a 3 years old, it doesn't smell particularly harsh or rough because of the peatiness that's in there. Now that, blimey, that has surprised the hell out of me, because as soon as it rolls off the glass and onto your tongue, it's silky smooth, really, really smooth, and the nose is a lot more powerful than the flavour. It's really smooth. I believe they mature it in sherry casks, possibly bourbon casks. I'm not quite sure, but there is a definite kind of sherry cask element to it, and it's not a rich, fruity sherry cask element. It's just a really smooth, just kind of like all the medicinal edginess that's on that nose is just calm down, get on the tongue, sit around for a bit, swirl around your mouth. You could argue almost that it calms down too much because there's actually very little around the rest of your mouth. But it's interesting because it's quite disconcerting, because your nose is telling you, whoa, hang on guys, this is going to be full on, and yet when it hits your mouth it's like silky smooth, very gentle. The peatiness and the iodine and the smokiness is there, but it's really kind of in the background. It's not full on your tongue. It's not like Lagavulin when it was there. It's not too dissimilar to Lagavulin. If anything, it's slightly softer, and Lagavulin is obviously a 16-year-old, but I am really impressed with this. For hardcore Islay drinkers, it's probably not going to have enough in there, but for me, and I'd almost consider myself a hardcore Islay drinker because I love any Islas. Okay, for hardcore Islay snobs who think that any other whiskey that's not Islay is just not worth touching with a barge pole, it's probably not full on enough for them and smoky enough and not enough of their manlyhood to put in their mouth type thing. That sounds a bit wrong, didn't it? But I tell you what, as a balance of kind of a really, really easy drinking Islay, this is fantastic. Well done, guys. Really, really impressed. You're looking at about 40 quid for this. And I think that price is probably because of the marketing that's in there. It's unusual, it's different. I'd be very, very interested to try one of their standard bottlings, kind of a non-peated one that they consider kind of their standard English whiskey. If this is the route they want to go down, fair enough, because it's really, really good. But if they're looking for sort of a character of their own, rather than going, we're an English whiskey, but we're matching the rest of Islay, fair enough to them. But if they're trying to get some kind of identity, I'd be really interested in trying that. If the guys from the English Whiskey Company are watching this, highly unlikely, but you never know. But if they are watching this and you want to send a miniature my way of what you'd consider your standard bottling, I'd love to try it out, because that's really, really bloody good. Really impressed with that, guys. What a good way to finish. Right, that's number 12, I believe. So yeah, keep an eye out for that. If you like your Islay whiskies and you can get hold of that, get hold of that. Very, very good indeed. That was a pleasure. I'll see you next time.